Despite living in Japan for many years, I didn't know that it had a Christian heritage. I did some research and found at least 17 sites in Tokyo linked to hidden Christians. One is, I would say, an astounding public miracle. The hidden Christians, or Kakure Kirishitan, lived in early 17th century Japan. In 1638, Christianity was prohibited, and severe punishments were meted out to all who refused to disavow their beliefs. Today, Christianity is freely practiced in Japan, but you can still find traces of the past. I visited the Hibiya library in Tokyo, where an Edo period medal was found. It is from a coffin that was found during an excavation in the area of the Tokyo Station Yaesu North exit. I was not allowed to take photos, but you can see a copy of this on their website. The exhibit also shows an old rosary that was with the medal. This shows that this area used to be where Christians congregated. These bells stand today in the site of a former missionaries' hiding place. Here at the Saiwai building here, this whole place used to be the home of this very important person in Japan, and it was also a place where Christians congregated. The owner of the compound was Keito Samanosuke Yoshiaki, a servant of the ruling daimyo Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Keito had no knowledge that a missionary, Father Diego de San Francisco, was hiding in his property and evangelizing more souls to Christ. Also in hiding was a man known to all of Edo, John Haramondo. He was tall and handsome and came from a noble samurai family. He was a Christian. In 1614, he was arrested. When he wouldn't renounce Christianity, he so enraged the authorities that they branded a cross on his forehead and cut off the tendons on his hands and feet. All of the other Christians were rounded up in this area. I said a prayer for all of them here. Only a short train ride away from here is the Genna Christian Heritage Park. What happened here is really miraculous. Early in December, the executioners finally came to carry out the shogun's sentence. They entered the dungeon, went first to Father Jerome and unshackled his feet. Then they threw a heavy rope about his neck and bound his hands behind his back with it. Father Francis and the other Christians were handled in no more human fashion. They bound them all and counted them to lead them out to the place of execution. Haramondo brought up the rear of the procession, likewise with an inscribed placard, though his was somewhat smaller, and accompanied by the rest of the Christians. Ahead and behind, on both sides, they were surrounded by armed policemen so that no one might approach them. And so through the streets of Edo, the city where our holy faith had been so afflicted, they paraded as though in triumphal procession with banners unfurled and flying. Outside the city, along the road that runs toward Kami, 50 stakes had already been set up on the place of execution. 3 of them, those nearest the city, stood a little apart from the others. All were heaped around with faggots. The firewood was placed in such a way that when it burst into flame, the fire would blaze at least 1 ell away from the stake. The crowd of onlookers who streamed in from all directions was enormous. The place, which was of no mean dimensions and the neighboring mountain were filled with spectators, among them many nobles and princes, who had assembled in Edo just at that time. One could believe that it had been so arranged by God's providence in order to reveal the more widely what power the Christian religion brought to those who embraced it. As soon as they reached the spot, the Christian heroes were all bound to the stakes, except the three who, as we have mentioned, were on horseback and were not permitted to dismount. Those at the stakes lifted their eyes to the heaven they yearned for, and filled with hope, they begged strength and courage for the last battle. Father Jerome, however, began to preach with glowing fervor to show that the faith of the Christians was the only true belief, that all others were false and empty illusions. Simon Empo did likewise in his burning zeal, not only when he was bound to the stake, but all along the way, urging all passers-by to accept the faith of Christ and remain steadfast therein. Then, when the police applied the torches and the faggots caught fire, the flames blazed aloft on all sides, while the happy souls called aloud upon the holy names of Jesus and Mary. Words cannot tell what constant and invincible spirit they showed amid such torment. There was not a one that complained or moaned or even betrayed in his face the slightest sign of pain. The onlookers were so deeply impressed by the sight of such amazing constancy that even the heathen murmured that such courage was more than natural, for it was normal for condemned criminals to experience pain at the loss of at least something. The fathers were watching it all from horseback, but with unbroken spirit, so that by God's grace their courage might not sink. For that is what the judges had hoped, and for that reason had delayed their execution, that the horrible burning might shake their purpose. But far from letting themselves be terrified by so frightening a death, all the more enthused. Not only they, but also two of the spectators, a man and a woman, who when the fire was at its height, ran out of their own free will to the place of the judges and shouted for all to hear that they too were Christians and followers of the same way as those who were already in the flames. As a flame with a heavenly ardor, they had desired, but at the order of the authorities were bound and thrown in prison. There they were kept in chains and made all who saw them wonder at the power of the divine law in the hearts of men, and at the heaven-sent strength given those whose only desire on earth is to follow God, the supreme lawgiver. When the fires had died out, and so to the lives of all, the others were made to dismount and were bound to the stake. As soon as the fire was kindled, these brave crusaders of Christ greeted one another and shouted mutual encouragement. And Father Jerome reminded Haramondo how short-lived the pain would be in comparison with the eternity of glory awaiting them. As the fire flared up and began to enwrap them, these servants of God could be seen through the flames, braving the first onslaught of the blaze with surpassing valor. Father Jerome could be seen first turning towards the city, praying for it briefly, then turning where the flames, fanned by the wind, attacked him the most fiercely, partly to show that he did not fear it, partly to say some last words to the folk who stood there in greater numbers. He remained always the same, ever erect, and exhorting the crowds with great zeal, until he succumbed to the might of the fire, and rendered his spirit back to his Creator, falling to his knees as he died. As to John Haramondo, what was particularly striking and a sign of great spirit was that as the flame raged about him with particular force, he put his arms about it as though it were something cherished. He stood unmoved the whole time until he fell forwards, together with a stake, and lay outstretched upon the ground. But Father Francis, who was the last to remain alive, remained standing upright, even in death, leaning on the stake from which he had not shrunk even amid the most excruciating torments. Thus ended the terrible tragedy. The day which shed such glory on the Christians was December 4th, 1623. All of these events were witnessed by two other Christians, and one of them was Father Diego Yuki Ryosetsu. So we're approaching the site where the Christians were executed. There's a memorial stone and marker here, and it talks about what happened here. This place is a very good spot to do prayers. It's very quiet amidst the hustle and bustle of Tokyo. I hope you can come visit this place and be blessed by it. The last place I visited was the Takanawa Catholic Church, where you can find a memorial for the Edo martyrs. Would you like to visit these places too? Let me know in the comments. By the way, I spent a year with the saints and wrote about them. They are the men and women who changed the world and history for the better. Please do check it out.